My name is Ali, and this is the second part of this series. I think it'll be free um, of discussing the Fabric real-time analytics demo that I've created. So the end of the last part, I ended up by showing this plan of having um, listening to an API that is provided by NTYO on my laptop, creating an event stream, feeding it into a KQL database, and then sending it to a Power BI. And I think in the next segment, I'll talk about the Python bit. Now, whilst I was preparing for this and learning how to do it, Microsoft came out with a blog uh, written on 4th of December, so just yesterday, by Liam Lemme, which is quite an interesting one. It covers kind of the same territory that I'm going to talk. And interestingly, the example that they chose to use is the ISS Space Station API. It's worthwhile reading this. It's a good description of the steps that need to be taken. And there's a GitHub that is connected to this with the code and examples. The difference is mainly that they go and use C to create the custom app. I've deliberately gone and done it with Python because I think that most users um, that come to Fabric are not wide breadth with programming. Are more, I want to do Power BI and a little bit of Python and just get going fast. Um, it's a good blog, and there's really good references at the end. That's worthwhile you going and reviewing them. Where are they? Here, these Microsoft Learn entries. They've really upped their game, and they're really good. Okay, so as I said, I'm using the N2YO API that includes also information about the ISS station, however, much more. And I've chosen to take the version of the API that asks what you give it. It's stuck. You give it this one here. You say, I'm standing in location so and so on Earth. What are the satellites, what are the bodies, celestial bodies that are talking, sending radio signals that I can observe at this particular moment? And the way you call this is you say, this is my latitude, this is my longitude. I'm at sea level or higher or lower. This is the cone that I would like you to search within, and this is the type of satellites that I would like you to tell me that I can see or not. So, for instance, TV satellites are category 34, and the ISS is category 2, and so forth and so forth. Obviously, to call the API, you need to register and have a API key and be a little bit careful of the load that you send them, because specifically this particular type of query is a little bit of compute intensive on their side. So obviously, when I do I call the API with a lot of pauses in between to be a good citizen. And the code that I've created runs on my laptop, but naturally this can run, let's say, also on a Raspberry Pi. One needs definitely this particular library. The Azure.Event Hub is the way that you can communicate and push information to the real-time analytics in Fabric. So what you can see here in the code, I'll run through it very fast. It's not that important here. I say, okay, please search within 70 degrees cone. Look at these three locations. So I'll cycle through these locations. Here's the categories that I've taken from that website. I just type them in. I handshake with Fabric, and these two variables contain the keys that I need that Fabric gave me. I'll show you in the next step where I get these two bits of information. So there's the name for the connection string that I need, and so that's this one, and there's um, a access key that goes into this variable. Um, And then I just loop through the three locations. I loop through the different categories, construct the API call, and call it. I get a JSON file back. I tidy it up a little bit. And I strongly recommend that you stabilize the definition before you start talking to the next steps in Fabric. Although Fabric can handle the JSON changing, uh, it takes time until it figures it out, and sometimes you need to leave and come the whole Internet Explorer and go back into it so it can, and then wait a little bit until it sees that actually the JSON has changed. So it's just better if you sort that out, think the design in advance, get it done, have a stable structure, and then go to the next steps. Um, and the talking to the event hub, yeah, sorry, talking to Fabric. I This is code that is actually taken from a Microsoft example, um, and that's it. And I deliberately did it in a notebook and not in a .py file, because I think that most users of Fabric will prefer just to work in notebooks. And I just run this, and it starts feeding into Fabric. I won't do it now because I realized that this taxes my laptop's memory, and then everything else goes really, really slow at the moment, especially when I'm recording. So, okay, so let's go to Fabric. Um, when you start off, feels like a Power BI environment, but it's much, much more. But the whole point of Fabric is it all feels like one user interface, one feeling. And you can see I've already prepared things in advance here. And the first thing to do is to create a KQL database, because when you go and define the event stream, the end of the definition it says, would you please write it to the KQL database? So step number one, create a KQL database. And the way to do it is you go and you say, I would like to work actually in the real-time analytics paradigm, and I can just create a new KQL database. I have already one pre-prepared. I prepared earlier. And let's go into the event stream. The definitions are really easy. It's just fill in um, selection boxes that are pre-populated, some of them, and some of them you just follow a naming convention. Or so when you create a event stream, you can take it from an existing IoT hub or event hub. And I've tried it with a colleague; it works nicely. But so if you go and say new source, you can see you can do one of these. Uh, I've the demos that I've seen, or most of people prefer to do a custom app. And when you go for a custom app, usually it recommends that or the example that you are given is to use C# code. But as you can see, I'm using um, a Python. All you need to do really is to say, look, I've got a an input that is coming from a custom app, and I provide it with the entity name. Just click on this, and you get it. You copy it, and you put it in your environment variables for Python. And this connection string primary key is the other parameter I gave it, and that's it. So it starts loading the data, and you can see some history and details, and the insights give you information about how much information has been coming in, how much has been given out. And as you can see here, I am sending it to, does it open up when I go to it? If I do a new destination, You can send it to a lakehouse, to a KQL database, or to a reflex. I've obviously decided to send it to a KQL database. So if you go and we look at the KQL database, which is here. By the way, when you create a KQL database, you can actually just send it or go for a pre-processing query first. And I think the recommendation is to do some pre-processing queries to downsize the data that is stored and add to it. Very much recommended to add to it date and timestamp using the internal KQL timestamp, because it's not. If you look at the data that was created for me, open it up. There's no timestamp. Of course, if I create the query, if I do a query over here, I can use the internal KQL functionality to say, okay, by these times and so forth. And the nice thing is actually, if you just click on this button here, it will create for you a Power BI report pointing here at this table. I've got already one I prepared earlier, which I showed also how I embedded it in the PowerPoint in the previous segment. So if I go to report, no, this is the one I want to show in the next segment. I'll go into this one. Yeah, you got, I for some reason in this particular workspace, I'm not allowed to use mappings. That would make sense to put in a map, but I'll show you how I get to a map in a second. Obviously, this is a nice report that it's taking time for me to react, for it to react to my clicks. And obviously, if you publish it, if you share it, you can actually use the information that is given to you when you share to include it as a live application within PowerPoint, which is really, really nice. Okay, another way is actually to go to your desktop PowerPoint, and when you say get data, you've got an experimental connector to Fabric. You'll see it in a second. Here we are. And if you use the KQL database, you point at that table, the KQL table, which you see I've already loaded over here, so I won't do it again. And obviously you can connect to the other artifacts within Fabric. These are still in preview. I don't think they'll be in preview for a very long time. Microsoft is quite aggressive on moving on the roadmap. So I think I will end it here. Thank you very much for listening. And in the next segment, I'll talk about pointing Python at the KQL database and handing it over to Power BI. So thank you very much for listening.